Live.
I feel like we just need a jingle while we're like, they're sitting here like.
We're dancing to the beat of our own music.
I feel like we just need a jingle while we're like, they're sitting here like.
We're dancing to the beat of our own music.
I feel like we just need a jingle while we're like, they're sitting here like. Sorry, guys.
We're dancing to the beat of our own music.
It's so weird. I feel like we just need a jingle while we're like, they're sitting here like. Sorry, guys. Okay, it was in two places. Wow, that was crazy. That was like a, I don't know. I love how I made Megan lose her shit. We're off to a great start. We're like,
oh my God.
I'm having coffee.
I'm having greens. Living that healthy
Hello,
life.
So if you're still here after that, I didn't scare you off.
What was that?
Say hi.
All right, that's got me all loosey-goosey now.
Now we're awake. Welcome to our discussion of union.
Yeah.
If you didn't catch it in the beginning of the book.
On our infinite loop.
Oh my gosh.
Oh man, that was great. All right, well, we're talking about union.
Didn't catch that.
And this was our September book of the month.
Yes.
September, yeah.
Let's see, we haven't had a memoir in a while. Memoirs.
Yep.
There's two authors. Last one was Made.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've just had nonfiction since then. So now we're on our second memoir.
Yep, that was a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, so like say hi if you're here and then tell us your thoughts on the book, like general thoughts. Did you like it? Did you not like it? And then if you are here and you did not read the book, because we were very explicit about that yesterday, I was like, I hope this isn't sounding like a broken record. But yeah, we just want to encourage you to come to the live streams, even if you haven't read the book. Because even like for this, like I wouldn't say that there's spoilers.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to be a spoiler when it's like a memoir.
Yeah, because there's not like a plot in a way, you know? And
Yeah.
it's like just a bunch of stories. Cool. So yeah, let us know if you read it, and like let us know if you didn't read it. Because then if we know that you're here and like not a lot of you read the book, then we can consider that, keep that in mind as we're like talking about it. So it's actually helpful. Cool. So yeah, Megan, what did you think of this book?
I thought it was really good. I really enjoyed reading it. So the subtitle is A Democrat, a Republican, and a Search for Common Ground. And that's kind of what caught our eye, right? And going into it, you're kind of like, oh, what is this going to be about? And it ends up being not really political at all, to be honest. There's like a few things sprinkled in here and there. And so that was nice. We had some pretty intense nonfiction that we read prior to this. So it was a really nice kind of breath of fresh air. And then I think what made it really cool is getting to talk to Jordan and Chris last week. It just kind of made it a little bit more meaningful, kind of like knowing the people behind it, and to see that like their voice, it through the writing is like exactly who they are, like in real life.
Yeah, that was cool. Yeah, that was fun. So yeah, I think I definitely agree with you on the like breath of fresh air kind of thing, because you and I both are like fiction readers primarily before we started reading for the book club. So it was a big change to like all of a sudden be reading nonfiction all the time. And I enjoyed it because it's fun learning things and feeling smarter. But yeah, it was nice to like not only with the like get into you feeling like you're still being told a story versus like facts and opinions and stuff. But I liked how this also focused so much on place, because I'm a big like sensory reader, right? So like I like to feel like I'm really there. Like I get annoyed with books. They feel cold to me when like you don't really feel like where you know where you are, you know? Like I can't see things, I can't hear things, smell things. So like the fact that they really like a big part of it for the authors, I think, was like making you feel like you're in New Orleans and making you feel like you're in the Badlands, or just on the road or like in a truck, you know, in a big old semi truck. Is that what they call it?
Yeah.
Yeah, feeling that feeling was really nice. I missed that for sure.
Yeah, and they have this really like big emphasis on storytelling, which I mean, it's a book, so you would expect it. But sometimes in memoirs, it's not really about the storytelling itself. It's like about the person's life and like get it, you know, the best way to get that across. But I felt like I loved the emphasis on like telling your story and like the importance of it and like the importance of telling each other our stories. And, you know, towards the end, they talk about it's therapeutic. It's like the way to get past something, you know, something traumatic that's happened is to tell your story. You know, so I thought that was really cool, like the emphasis on that, because I feel like that's what kind of what we try to do with the book club, right? That's why we like doing Takeover Tuesdays. So we want to hear everyone's stories. We want to see like, you know, peeling everything back, like what do we have in common?
Right. Yeah. And so like the subtitle is like a search for common ground, and like I'd say like that was one of the biggest themes, right? Was like what can we find? What are the things that unite us? And it's pretty like humanity first, you know, like feeling like doing the process of that like just gets you in touch with this kind of intangible thing that like you can only describe as just humanity and like feeling connection through common humanity, you know? So yeah, so I really liked that. And I thought it was just really well written too. It was just like nice to, not that I like didn't think it was not going to be, but like I guess it kind of gets back to like the feeling of place, but it's always nice to like feel like, oh, like this is just really well written. Like it's really like beautiful, and it feels like poetic, and I can feel like the emotions behind the words because the authors seem to really care about that.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of the curse of having an English degree. Is you're very hyper aware when someone isn't a good writer.
Yeah. You're like, oh boy. Very cool. Okay, so I'm gonna pull up some of our like quotes that we used. Did you have like a favorite chapter?
Oh yeah, it's the Pink chapter.
Oh yes, that was one of my favorites too.
Louisiana is the chapter title. But I also really liked the Page chapter. I feel like just from the reading and then from meeting them, Chris seems to be the more open of the two, both in the book and just, you know. And so with the Page chapter, I felt like that was the first time we really got to see something like deep inside of Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like that was him letting us in. And that it kind of comes from like that military background. You know, I've come from a military family. I'm married to a military man. And sometimes that life can be very private out of necessity. And a lot of times for men, you're especially in that you're not supposed to sort of talk about your feelings and like, and so to me, like, you know, I think the Paige chapter was really cool because we really got to see something of Jordan, and I really liked that.
Yeah. I agree. Like the idea of like sacredness, like there's you know, it's not like he gets into religion. So this is the chapter where like they kind of they don't crash, they like get like randomly invited to some strangers like swearing in to the military, right?
Yeah.
And it's like this young man, and and it was just like beautiful, but it was like in this context of like, you know, if you're not from that background, like something you kind of think of as being really kind of, I don't know, just not touchy-feely, right?
Yeah.
Like military, and they meet him at a gun, like a shooting range, which Jordan like brings Chris along, and Chris is like scared. And you know, the way that they like feed into their kind of stereotypes was often great. I think mainly with Chris, because he was the one that would like play into the like I don't know, the snowflake Enos a little bit. This is not my words, but like I don't know.
Yeah. And like a cool kind of like behind the scenes for you guys, if you didn't catch our last live stream, is this chapter in the book is actually when they decided, hey, we should write a book. So like it in the book, it's like was it like the third chapter, maybe like the third or fourth chapter? It's the fourth chapter. So it's the fourth chapter in the book, but in real life, like this was actually when they decided, hey, we need to write this book, you know, and they're trying to remember to write things down. And, you know, going on to kind of what you're saying about sacredness, on page 64, it says, Jordan wasn't sure Chris would truly appreciate the ceremony. There are few events more humbling than witnessing someone step forward to serve his or her country, Jordan felt. Chris might view it as just a story to tell, another tale from the road rather than something hallowed. How would Jordan feel if an enlistment became fodder for cocktail parties back in New Haven?
Yeah, it was interesting because it was the first time they were like grappling with the idea of taking these real people's stories and lives and putting their own like authorship to it, which is a big deal. Like it's a big responsibility. And so it was like there was this kind of like almost like dual narrative going, I feel like, where there's this idea of sacredness and respect and tradition and just humanity happening on the page, but then they were like, you could tell that they were also like presenting this idea of like them being on the brink of like, we're gonna take this step and like tell a story and like you know do something that is kind of sacred in its own way. And I was so touched by it, you know, like I don't generally have like super positive feelings when the military comes up, like it's not, you know, but this is like, it was a really beautiful moment, you know, you just like couldn't help but feel like heartwarmed by how they go about the ceremony, how everyone is just so like respectful and just in this moment together. So I think it kind of gets at, this is like, I guess like a good moment to like kind of just like draw the comparison of how, you know, I think we tend to lump together like establishment and people, And, you know, as someone who might have more criticism of like the military industrial complex and like the whole thing, and, you know, we don't need to be going to war and like all of that stuff, I think it can get easy to like lump in the people who on their end, like they're just trying, like they really are just trying to serve their country, or they really do just think it's like the next best step for their lives or something like that, or they really do feel a purpose. And so I think this chapter, like, it was kind of getting at like showing that perspective and making it seem very human. And it's like you at the very least can't like hate these people and read this chapter.
Yeah. And like, you know, for me, as you know, coming from like a military family and seeing like, you know, the pride that like, you know, my parents take in that, and, you know, being, you know, I was on Fort Meade, for example, on September 11th, and like being on a military base during that time, I feel like was such a unique experience, because you could just feel the community come together, and like it was a very big deal, you know, for that community, and just seeing the, you know, the pride of that, like, well, we can do something about it, like this is actually something we can do, you know, like we can go back to work tomorrow and like we're working towards something, you know, and we actually know what we're working towards, because sometimes these people are going to war and they don't even know why, you know. And so for me, it was nice. And, you know, I was there for my husband's swearing in, you know, and like, it is this really, it's like not formal. Like, you know, swearing in ceremonies are not formal. They're just kind of casual, like, oh, hey, you want to join the military? Cool. Like, here's the oath, you know, like, here's what you do. And yet at the same time, there is this like sacredness to it, because you realize the responsibility that you're signing up for. And so it's kind of like that weird juxtaposition, you know, of like something so casual and yet, you know, so large. And I feel like on my end, like the community that can be found within the military, like at least when I, you know, from what I've seen, like there's this community there because you don't have anyone else most of the time. Like you're in the middle of nowhere and you don't know anybody, but you have each other, you know. And, you know, as a kid, we'd be running in and out of each other's houses and like playing. You could be gone next week, but that didn't matter, you know. You just had to jump right into these friendships and this community. And I feel like that really showed through, because community was also another big theme in this particular chapter. And I felt like that showed through, because I feel like people, I don't know, that is something military people would do, is invite strangers to their cookout. They would invite strangers because that's what we do. Like, you know, that's, you have to make that community to get by, because, you know, you go through a lot of loneliness and you go through a lot of bad stuff, but you have that community. And I don't know, I thought that was a really cool illustration there, that kind of like goes through that. And of course, with anything, there is a lot of wrong that goes on, of course. I think it's naive to think anything's perfect. But I thought that was cool that they kind of like really encapsulated like what it's like to be in the military community.
Yeah, totally. I'm trying to add the Twitter. I forgot that we didn't do that. Sorry, guys. So yeah, I thought that it was like a really like beautiful chapter. And I'm really glad that they put that, and it was cool to see the turning point. So the next chapter, we're not going to go through like the whole book, but you know, the next chapter is interesting when we get to Mono Lake. First of all, I've been to Mono Lake, so I actually haven't been to a lot of the places they went to. But yeah, Mono Lake was cool. If you've ever been to Mono Lake, say something. It's like it's in California, or say something. Say that. Let us know. I'd be curious. But yeah, it's like this like desert, like there's hardly any trees, I guess, or it feels, maybe there are, but it feels like it's just like this like big old lake, and it's really salty, and it just like has this, it's not beautiful, like it's like kind of deadish, and like there's these things called tufa towers, which they mention, which are really cool, and they're like these like salt calcium. Well, I know it's like calcium, and they like build up and up and up. And so it's like Alien, basically, is what I'm trying to get at here. It's a really cool place, and I don't see how it's necessarily relevant to what happens, but it's the chapter where they get into an argument and they like put their argument in the fucking book.
Yep, they do.
It's so interesting. To like read it. Like, did you like get like heightened? Like, did you feel like you were in an argument when you were reading their argument?
Yeah.
Which, if you know, by the way, it's about like immigration and Trump's like comments about like they're not bringing their best. Like that's what they argued about.
Yes, and that part, like on page 81, that part when they're like, you know, I've watched cops be racist to my friends, all of that. That doesn't excuse the left from whipping up anger and hatred toward the police. And he says, "Let me fucking finish." And he's like, "Go ahead." And Chris is like, and Chris is like, "I honestly can't believe you hold these opinions." And Jordan's like, "What the fuck does that mean?" And literally, that's how it feels to be in an argument.
I know.
With people sometimes, because you get so caught up and you're like, "Who are you?"
Yeah.
I thought I knew you, and I just don't. And then it's funny because later on they're like, "Wait, we're saying the same things. Like, we believe the same thing. Like, we really do at the heart of it. We just think that there are different ways to go about it." But that part on page 81, though, I was like, I felt that. Like,
yeah. Okay, hold on one second. I have to yell it.
Someone's playing his music too loud.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, that was crazy. I was like, well, not gonna lie, first of all, that was like what I thought the book was gonna be more of. Because like I did kind of think like the whole thing was gonna be them like debating each other.
Mm-hmm.
And while they're driving, you know, which is like that's the one scene that we get that's like that. Maybe there's one other argument, I can't remember, but that's like the main one.
Yeah,
because they kind of do that, like they put it in kind of earlier in the book, and then the rest of the book is like other people talking, you know, like them, because they're writing a book, so they're like going to other people and interviewing them. So anyway, yeah, so you know, I think the point of it is like it's not about who's right, because it's one of those things where, especially if you can like read it out, like imagine if like you could read your arguments like transcribed, you know, like how crazy would that be?
Yeah, well, and it's crazy too, because they kind of like they put their argument on hold and they go swimming, and then they come back to it and they're almost like, what were we upset about? Like what was so bad that we literally almost just like lost our friendship? And you know, one of the things that they say that really stuck with me, and we talked about this with them last week, on page 87 towards the bottom, they say, "Finding common ground isn't about being right. It's about laying a foundation to argue passionately while respecting the other side. It's not about getting to agreement, but getting to the point where disagreement isn't reason to pull away."
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like that's really important, you know, because honestly, and we talked about this last week, again, that was a really good discussion, you guys. If you didn't catch it, go watch it. It's on our channel. But one of the things that we talked about was coming into a conversation without already having that preconceived notion of like, I'm right and you're not going to tell me otherwise. And no matter what you say, you're wrong.
Yeah. Like going into an argument trying to convince someone as the purpose of the argument. Like I am trying to convince you, not like I might have my mind changed.
Yeah. Or even if you don't, like, it's just like learning, right? And my thing is too, is you can't ever argue your side if you only know your side.
Yeah.
You know, you have to know all sides.
Chris made a good point that that I've seen that I've kind of experienced myself from like having people in like my family who are conservative, is like he's like, Jordan makes me a better liberal, which is like I definitely got that and I appreciated that, you know. It's like you you can have differing sides, but like understand your side more because you understand someone else's side, you know? That makes sense? Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, I really appreciated that. And like the fact that you see them like going through this process, like taking it so seriously, is really cool. And it's like really inspiring. And like, you know, obviously this is a very timely book. Um, like we were going to do this book earlier, but in May, I think. But its publication date got pushed back because of coronavirus. And so it's like even
Mhm.
closer to the election that we're reading it. And so I'm just reading this like, this is the perfect time to be reading this book. I hope more people read it.
Yeah, because I don't know. Yeah, it's really good, and I understand that like sometimes talking to someone is hard because especially when you have both of you coming to the conversation not to listen to each
Mm-hmm.
other but to prove a point, then it's like, well, of course I'm getting frustrated with you because you're not actually listening. And when someone isn't listening to you, that is frustrating. In my mind, it's one of the most frustrating things on the planet is when people aren't listening to you, you know, and like as you're talking to them, you know, and you're sitting there like you really aren't hearing what I'm saying, and so therefore I'm getting even more frustrated, and I'm just trying to prove my point out of spite at this point, and I'm just going to disagree with whatever you say because you're annoying, you know. And it's like if you come to the table without, you know, without being like I have to be right, and you're just coming to the table like, look, we're going to have this conversation and we might disagree, and that's okay, you
Yeah.
know, and we can get past that. But through that discussion, you find things that you do agree about, and at the heart of it, you probably have the same values. You just have a different way of that you think it should be fixed. And I think that is one of the themes that they talk about throughout the book a lot. You know, is that Jordan and Chris saw a lot of the same things the same way. They just saw like different ways to handle them, different policy ways to handle them, you know. And so it really, that's what politics is supposed to be about, right? Like it was supposed to be, you know, Republicans versus Democrat wasn't supposed to be this like huge based on like these huge moral things. They were supposed to be based on like where you lie, like policy wise and economy wise. They weren't supposed to be like, what do you believe morally? You know, that's not what politics was supposed to be. It was supposed to be, you know, here's the issue that we can all agree on is an issue.
Yeah.
We
Well,
just disagree on how to fix it.
exactly. I think it's important to note, you know, like why did it become such a heated argument so quickly? Like it was that comment. It was that comment that Trump had made in that one speech, that, you know, was very insulting to a lot of people. And but then what are they arguing about? They realize like what are we really arguing about? We're arguing about like what is the real issue? And so that I think that's kind of what they realize is like, oh, we just once we get rid of this, essentially what is a distraction, as bad as it is, you know, as much as it is a negative thing that I'm not saying doesn't deserve any attention, but like they get away from that and they realize like you gotta like sift through the bullshit and get to the like what is the real thing that we're actually talking about here, and like if this is just something that just gets us really, really charged and it doesn't actually matter to anyone in any like real significant way, maybe you should like, yeah, move on and or try to do a little more digging and figure out like what is it we're really talking about here.
Yeah.
Um,
And what part of it, like, were you upset about? You know, like what about the statement were you upset about? You know, and like kind of checking like where that comes from on your side and like where it comes from on their side, you know. And then what's interesting is, you know, they are having this argument about, you know, that comment about immigration, talking about, um, you know, the border, and then they go visit Jordan's, like I think it's like his nanny, who herself is an immigrant.
yeah.
Um, you know, and it's so interesting because it's kind of like, well, of course Jordan doesn't have a problem with immigrants. You know, he was practically raised by one.
Yeah.
you know, and and so it was interesting because it was kind of like the issue that they were taking was like with the words, and you know, they were taking sides almost immediately based on their party.
Yeah, based on like kind of what they've been told to think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they like in having that conversation, they both had that realization where they were like, you know, I jumped to this perspective. We both jumped into these like little pools, you know, apart from each other. And they realized that like in talking to each other, that there was much more complex things happening, or the other way, it was like it's actually a lot more simple. Like it's not as big of a deal. So what was the chapter? I'm forgetting. What was the chapter where they went to the Trump rally?
I think was that towards the beginning.
It was, I think.
Phoenix.
Yeah, I'm on there. Okay, cool.
Phoenix.
Yeah,
that one's funny to me because it starts out and this nurse is like yelling and yelling at someone else, and then all of a sudden she just like stops.
Yeah.
And she's like, why can't we just talk to each other? Like it's almost like she's like, why am I yelling?
Yeah.
She's like, what happened to conversation? Like she says, you have an opinion and I have an opinion, and we're supposed to be able to sit here and have a discussion. And she said the reason America is dead is because we can't sit here and we can't talk.
Yeah.
But it's so funny because she goes from like straight up just like yelling like to like, can't we just all get along? Like,
yeah. Like she could have. So it is. What's crazy to think about is how like someone could have taken a picture of her and like memed it, and then she would go down in history as like that. Like,
yeah.
When like minutes later, she's like, "Can we just talk?" Like, and like says something that like completely diffuses the situation and like makes things better. Yeah, it was just crazy to feel like you were just there, like at a Trump rally with them. And, you know, I mean, unless you're someone who's been to a Trump rally, then this might not be as crazy to you. But to me, I was so glad they put it in the book, really.
Yeah. And I think for me, it was interesting because they weren't, I was expecting, oh, they're going to talk about Trump rally and they're going to talk about how much it sucked. Yeah. And instead they talked about how like, he's actually this really captivating speaker, and he starts talking and everyone is just wrapped.
Yeah.
With, you know,
that was like kind of scary.
But yeah, like, but they were like, they just had his undivided attention, and I was like, that, you know, that reminds me of church. But it was just, and they actually do, you know, on page 46.
I think this. Yeah, you found it. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, that part. He said he was preaching to a room of believers and he knew how to move them over and over again. Those men and women in the room and his parishioners elsewhere were anointed. He was their champion and he made sure they knew it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that paragraph starts, we were both struck by Trump's power and command of the room. So the way he changed tone, this is good too, going from soft to forceful and back again, kept the audience entranced. It's just, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to lie, it kind of creeped me out. But it also was like, it's also a picture of Trump that you don't see. Like, people on the left only portray him as this like bumbling idiot who has like the vocabulary of a teaspoon and, you know, and just makes zero sense. And like, I'm not even saying that's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, we're not praising him either. We're really not. But
Yeah.
it's just interesting because they go there and they're like, look, the media is like mocks him for this, you know, disjointed speech, but it works. Like, people are listening to him. He has their attention and he is telling them what they want to hear, you know, and it's just interesting to me because I'm like, I mean, I still think I don't like him, you know, I still don't. But it was just interesting to hear them kind of talk about, like, I'm not saying they said it wasn't as bad as we think, but it's just interesting that they were like, it kind of wasn't like it wasn't really violent inside. It was more so like this, like everyone was just listening and he just had this like control over the room.
And I think they were kind of, well, they say they, I almost wonder if Chris more so wrote this chapter Because it would have made more sense that he wrote it anyway, because you want to have that outside perspective, not the inside perspective. So anyway, yeah, when he was saying like, like Ben Carson takes the stage, and I can't stand that guy, but he's talking about how there's like so much words like unity and love and shared humanity, and obviously this is like earlier. This this is a rally that took place a couple years ago at least. And there's been a lot more negative talk recently, but yeah, it was just interesting to like see them paint a more unique and more nuanced picture. Also to talk about how they talk about people at the crowds, how like there's like this one guy off to the side who looks really sketchy, but then like the people around them are like normal ass people,
Yeah. Well, and then there's also this really cool, like, so they walk back outside and there's this really cool interaction, page 48 and 49, where it said, we warily walked around them and approached 4 men, each of them a few inches taller than us. They were making rapid fire points back and forth with animated gestures. We think the language around Black Lives Matter is too divisive, said one of the Trump supporters. It's tearing the country apart. But you have to understand, our kids are getting gunned down in the streets by the police, one of the other men said, and we get no justice from the courts. The cops are killing us with impunity. We quickly realized that while engaged in passionate argument, none of the participants were angry. The tone was respectful and they were actually listening to each other. I hear you, one of the Trump supporters interjected, but all lives matter, man. When you say Black Lives Matter, it sounds like you're dividing Americans into camps. All lives should matter. You're not wrong, but we feel like our lives, Black lives, have been undervalued in society, one of the men said. When we say Black Lives Matter, that's what we're really asking for, is to be treated with the same dignity as everyone else. We just want our lives to count too, and I appreciate that you're worried about division, but our community is in a lot of pain. We're just trying to be heard. And then they talk about how like throughout the conversation, television cameras were trained on like the shouting match that was going on across the street. And they were like, so if you were to just know the rally off of just what the media was showing you, like you wouldn't see that right across the street, people were having this really respectful conversation. You would only see those people yelling back and forth about why isn't Trump condemning the KKK? Well, why aren't you condemning Antifa? You know what I mean? Like, why aren't you condemning them? And so that's all you see. And that chant, hope, not hate. But across the street, they're having this really great conversation.
Yeah. I mean, like, right now, like, some people I know, I should say, I guess, the people I know who mostly, like, tune into, like, Fox News and stuff, like, they're just so, it's, like, sad to me. They're so depressed. They're so, like, genuinely depressed. They're so sad that they think the country is, like, being torn apart by Antifa. Like they think basically Antifa and then like kind of like the Black Lives Matter extremists or whatever, and the looters and stuff like that. And it's like, I can't even like argue with them because it's just like they're being given this beaten over the head with this narrative and these images of these extreme things that I bet you some of that shit is like, that happened yesterday or a week ago, and and they're just milking it for all it's worth, the media,
Yeah.
It's sad to me. It's like that should be a crime, in my opinion. Like you are stealing people's happiness.
Yes, and the thing is, like, I went to a protest like in my city, and literally it was this like beautiful thing. I mean, I saw like old people, young people of all like races and backgrounds. And like, it was this really cool thing, and not a single violent thing happened. And in fact, so at one point, I think someone had never been close to a street sign before, and they reached up to smack it, not knowing that it makes a really loud noise. And literally everyone in the vicinity turned and looked at them like, you better not. Like, don't even think about it. Like, this is, you know what I mean? Like, do not draw any of the attention. Like, that's not what we're here for. And they were like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. You know what I mean? And so it's almost kind of like, look, people who are like that is, I wish more people would have seen it. Cause it was beautiful. They shut down a big chunk of the city for it. I mean, we walked really far, and like, I mean, and the chants and just all these people coming together. It's like this really beautiful thing, and but you're right. Like what they're showing isn't actually that. And it's like, you can acknowledge that both of them are happening at the same time. Like you can't acknowledge that. And I don't understand why they only want to show like the bad. And it's like bad and good can happen at the same time.
Yeah. Well, it's just that bad news sells and good news doesn't.
Gotta get those ratings.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So all that stuff was really cool. The page chapter, the argument, the Trump rally, like. But it started to get to a point where I was like, this book needs to expand more because it feels very like white America, And luckily they did that, or I think they gave a really really good effort, and so it seems to me like essentially, and we did talk about this in our last live stream, but like basically, they start doing road trips, and then after like the third one, they said they realized they could be writing a book about it, and then there's a process after that of actually getting the like okay to write the book, and getting the publishing deal. So once they have the publishing deal, you can kind of tell because they really like take a like journalistic approach to it, which I really enjoyed. They like make an effort to find people, like real people in America who, have stories to tell, who have different perspectives. And yeah, I really enjoyed that. I'm so glad that they did that because I realize now, I didn't go into it thinking that, but like afterwards I was like, yeah, it would have been a much weaker book, it would not have been as good of a book.
Yeah.
If not for like the fact that they had done that. So yeah, let's see. What were some of our favorite chapters there?
Louisiana was like, that one I think was one of my favorites. That one made me cry.
Yeah, we should definitely go to the made Meghin cry.
Yeah, Louisiana made me cry. So this one was the one where they
made me cry. We can go to that one next. What page is it on? Because I have them all out of order.
Which one?
Louisiana.
93.
Okay.
Yeah. So this one, they decided they wanted to see America from a trucker's perspective. And it was really interesting. And I will say, like, definitely there are some stereotypes and some of them end up being true. But then some, they talk about that, like, with all the time, think about like all the time that like the trucker's name is Pete that they end up finding, through this guy, and it ends up the guy, Pete didn't even know him. The guy just like put it out through dispatch, and Pete was like, yeah, sure, I'll take them. But it ends up like they didn't really talk about like any preconceived like notions that they had about him, not really. But they would talk about things that they were surprised about. So one of the things is that like Pete is this like really smart guy. And it's because he has so much time on the road that he's like, well, I'm listening to books and I'm listening to podcasts and I'm listening to the news. And like, he has all these like opinions about things. And it's funny too, because like he shows up with a Make America Great Again, t-shirt and kind of laughs about it. But then he also talks about how like, what was it? Climate change. He goes into climate change and how he thinks that's a really big deal.
His like daughter or something is gay, right?
Yeah.
His daughter's gay, so he's like, it was like, so that was the part that almost made me cry. It was so like the way that they said he did, talked about it, like where it was like
I'm trying to find it.
Try to find it and I'll keep talking. He like acknowledged that like it's in the Bible, but she's my daughter and I love her, so I'm gonna have to just come to terms with the fact that this goes against my faith. It was like, it was actually this like extremely beautiful and elegant like logic, like from a Trump supporter, like it's just, it was that was really cool. And then like you said, the moment when he was like, the one thing I don't like about Trump is, he just can't come, why does he, I don't get why he doesn't come around on climate change. I think that's what he says.
Yeah.
He's really sweet.
Yeah. Yeah, that page 105 is the one with where he's conflicted, and it says he came around to the conclusion that if God was love, how could a loving relationship be wrong? It hurt him to reject a passage of the Bible, but he found a greater cause in supporting his sister and stepdaughter in their relationships, even if it might leave him damned one day. And and just the fact that he was like, I don't know, that was, and he talks about all his marriages because he was married like a million times, and like how he loved each and every one of them, but the one he was married to now is like the most special. Like,
that's really sweet.
Yeah, that's what he said. He said, my biggest problem with him is that he doesn't acknowledge climate change.
Yes.
And then the very next sentence is the diesel engine roared as being. So he's so concerned about climate change as he's like driving in this way.
So he's a unique one, and it's like that is a huge part of the book, is like, just knowing that there's no one is like 100% a stereotype,
Yeah.
So it's like you have to like, in this day and age, it's like you have to like do that work and acknowledge that. So definitely read this entire book just for the Pete chapter alone.
Yeah, it's kind of a long chapter too. I think it's one of the longer ones.
Yeah,
it's
just too good. There's so much good material.
I'm like literally like it's pretty good chunk of book right there. Like page 93 to like 121.
What about Mexico?
Yes.
So they decide they're going to go to, like they have this argument earlier in the book, and then they decide about that centers around immigration from the Mexican border, and they decide they're going to go there. And I guess I don't even remember if it actually was in the book or just in the live stream, but we did talk about how they had like the most amazing food there. So now I'm just like,
yes.
So this was like interesting when they meet the there's like border patrols on either side of the border, and they really talk about the border patrol on the Mexican side of the border. And so it's just interesting where you see them have to like face this situation, in a human sense, like, and not just come to terms with, but like, like face the anger that they have and the distrust that they have. I think at one point they like end up talking about like music or something like that. Yeah. So that was like a cool part, I thought. And then later on, they talk about how it's like, I feel like this was like they were kind of poking fun at themselves, and it was also just an exciting moment, but they like are trying to get past the border, and they think, oh, we have this amount of time, and then they realize, try to get past the border before nightfall, and they think they have a certain amount of time, and then they realize there's a time change, and then they're like, oh shit, you don't.
Yeah. And they have to drive through Juarez. That's what it was. And they'd heard all these like terrifying stories about it.
And they make it, so I think, the point of the story is to like, I don't know, just like show them being like vulnerable, and show them like almost like we're kind of like not laughing at them, but because it is obviously like we know that we would probably be like concerned in that same situation, but I felt like they were trying to like show them as not having all the answers, and like, like being vulnerable, and I just thought that was an interesting part. I thought it was interesting that they included that. I don't know what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I also like too how the at the at the border, one of the officers on the Mexican side, they kind of like take this dig at an Americans, and I was like, damn, okay. But it's basically like on page 135, yeah. and someone just asks them like, so how are the migrants viewed by the locals here? And he goes, we don't have a problem with migrants. We see them as people. And I was like, yeah. Yeah. And they were like, well, do you ever have issues? Do you stop them? And he was like, no, we don't stop migrants. Mexico doesn't judge people like that. They're humans and we see them as humans. Americans don't. And I was like,
whoa.
Do you like, I feel like we're so caught up in like our little American bubble, right?
Yeah.
And like, we don't realize that like, what we say, like people know like what we think, you know what I mean? Like not we, I'm not saying like we personally, but like the big things in America, like get back to people. It's not like, oh, you think like people in Mexico don't know what the president's saying about them, or like they don't know what people say about them, like they don't know the issues. Of course they do. How do you think it makes them feel? And then it's like, you know, we're trying to have this, you know, America thinks they have this like morally superior high ground all the time. And then it's like, these just like humble border agents are like, people are people, no matter where they come from.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not enough, I guess. And this is not like my opinion or me trying to poo poo anyone, but I think it is like it's a low number of Americans that travel abroad. And I think there's reasons for that. Like, you know, like I said, I'm not trying to like poo poo anyone. But there's something, and I've only done it a handful of times. But yeah, there is like this like total just like humility you have to face as an American abroad. And it's not like, I mean, for me, the Mexico border is not even that far away. You know, it's not like it's that far, but it, you know, I've never been south of San Diego. So yeah, like facing that in real life where you have to like, you feel this, like I have to, not resonate, what's the word? I have to just like deal with this weird kind of like story of my country and this weird like, you know, and there's so much of it that you realize like you don't know about, that doesn't affect you to a large extent. You know, so yeah, I mean obviously this isn't true for all Americans, but for I think a good percentage of us. So yeah, I remember like when I did the study abroad, a lot of the other students in my groups who were actually in homestays with like French people, because I was in France, and like they actually had uncomfortable dinner conversations, you know, like they had to like face that, and I like kind of felt bad for them, because it's like, especially if you're kind of like the person of like someone who does to a certain extent understand the issue, and you know, you generally feel hopeless. That's a big reason why we started the book club, so that we could just be a little bit more knowledgeable and hopefully feel a little less hopeless.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So yeah, that was definitely like a necessary chapter. And I'm definitely glad that they put it in there. Just more people need to face that, and that's why they went there in the first place. Was they were just like, look, we need to see it. We need to meet these people. We need to see what's actually happening firsthand. And yeah, they got freaked out even more than what they have in the book. In our live stream last week with the authors, I think it was like Chris was saying, like at one point the whole road just stopped out of nowhere and they freaked out, and then it was just construction.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. That was an interesting story. So yeah, you know, it's obviously, it's not like the problems aren't real. It's not like there's things that don't need to be fixed, but it's just a matter of making the effort to see it for what it is, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So let's see what other chapters. Detroit. So I'm gonna remind myself of exactly what happens, but this is about sort of like recidivism. I think I have a quote that I can pull up. Or actually, I might just start talking about my favorite quotes. You had some favorite quotes as well, Megan?
Like in general?
Yeah. So, this is from the Tulsa chapter. So I really liked when in the Tulsa chapter they talk with Mimi, who like helps people get like not go back into prison, which is like the idea of recidivism. And so one of the quotes I shared on the page was, I don't have the page number unfortunately because I don't put them on the canvas, but it says, "That's why we tell stories. No amount of numbers can accomplish that. I can talk to them all day about recidivism this and average that, but the stories are what makes someone do something." So I thought that, she was really interesting. And she had a really great story. And I just really liked that thought of, that's like what the book is essentially doing, is especially once you get like past the halfway point, and, they're really like helping people tell their stories through this whole like tapestry that they're making. And like Mimi really speaks to the idea of like deserving a second chance, and that's a big like theme. Like I think if anything, like the two biggest themes that they really get into are like finding common ground, and then also like this American idea of like you should be able to have a second chance. So yeah, like the idea, I think I shared that quote specifically because being like the math movement, like we're the math people, which that as the group as large, because I'm not a math person. Like it's important that we just understand the power of story, and like hopefully, politicians use stories all the time in their stump speeches to sway their voters, but I think there needs to be like a two-way street when it comes to that, of like they need to be paying attention. It's important to pay attention not just to the numbers, but also to the stories, because the numbers are never going to tell like a nuanced story. They're going to tell a simple story, I think. So yeah, I really that one really resonated with me.
Yeah. That's page 251, by the way.
Oh yeah, cool.
Yeah. That one was really good, and it's interesting because they do spend a lot of time with prisoners. Like there are like different chapters where they do, and I think that's like really cool that they decided to. It's really cool to me that they decided to put that in there, because it is important, and I think it's an important part of our population that like people don't really care to talk about, or like they just don't think it's important.
Yeah.
And there was this really, I'm trying to find it now. I think it was in the Detroit chapter, but there is this really like interesting statistic. Yeah, so it's on page 167. Almost 1 out of every 3 people who complete their sentences will find themselves right back in prison in a matter of months. And they were talking about this when they were with Brenda, who had that kind of like a smaller version of what Mimi would do, just like on a smaller scale. And she would have women make bags, and they would make these bags, but at the same time, they would like help them figure out a career for themselves, like where their next step's going to take them, and then give them the tools to do so. Because I feel like it's so easy to be like, you should get your life on the right track. Like so easy to say that, but then actually like helping someone that's like, going that like extra mile, that's really how they get their life back on track. Because it's really easy for you to say that, especially if you've never been in that situation before. But then you think about it and it's like, it's hard to get your life back on track because people won't hire you. You know, like people have this, like now they have this perception of you, and it's like, well, if you can't work, unfortunately in this society, if you don't work, you don't eat, you don't sleep really, you know, like you don't have the access, and so what do you have to do instead?
Yeah, like that. I think this is the quote you were talking about, but yeah, like many returning citizens don't have an identification card or driver's license. It's like, how do you do anything without it if you don't even have that? And then you have to like go to the effort of getting it, which, you know, it's just like,
Yeah,
it's no
you know,
easy feat, you know, we just, and then people will just like yell at you, like, just get a job.
and it's like, it's really genuinely not that easy, you know. And you know, it's really hard, and I've liked that, you know, that both of them went into this, and I really liked in Detroit too when they had the Shakespeare Club,
Mm-hmm.
and they did like the plays, and they did them, you know, and, you know, and Gabriel in particular, and so they talked about, and he was the poet, you know, and talking about redemption, and when in order to, like, you have to come to the point where like you're not okay in what you're in your misery. And I really thought that was cool because it's like there kind of is this balance of like, society shouldn't make it hard for you, it shouldn't, but at the same time you have to also want that change, you have to want it, you know. And this, I could go into a lot of like the theories of behavioral change because that's what I'm learning about right now in school, but but genuinely, if you don't want to change, it's going to be hard too. But I feel like it's hard to then want to change or want to get your life back on track if you know society isn't going to help you.
Yeah.
So it's hard to even want to do that if you know that wanting it isn't going to be enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then to the Shakespeare stuff, which like I agree, I absolutely love. On page 170, this was one of my favorite quotes. The Renaissance, it seemed, was block to block. It was an imperfect narrative that was both under and over inclusive. But then again, stories always are. We tell them to make sense of our surroundings, and oftentimes that means reducing the world to something we can appreciate. Stories are our best estimation, a way of guessing at the forces that leave us where we are, where we're headed, and where we've been. Detroit and its mythology seemed no different. The Renaissance was a story, and a good one. It made sense. So yeah, I just really appreciated the way that they said, you know, stories like are powerful, like they are powerful, like within our lives. And I don't think, you know, that's like brought home enough, like in schools and stuff like that. Like, you experience life as a story, you know, if you can understand. I feel like there was something that like helped my like actual life skills by like taking the time to do a whole degree that was just on like analyzing stories and analyzing just the moving parts, almost like, you know, a chessboard, and like understanding, you know, why things are like this, which resulted in things being like that, and like, you know, why these people are this way, so they made this choice that affected these other people. You know, like everything is this like interwoven web, and like if you can actually have that power to like step back and like be like analyze it and like be critical of it, like I think that there's a power in that.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And I like how they, you know, also with the stories, they always say, I think especially in the Tulsa chapter, is they say like, you have to tell all of the story. Like some parts may hurt, some parts are going to be painful, but you have to know that story in order to move on and in order to like build a better future, you know. And in Tulsa, the Tulsa chapter specifically, they're talking about Black Wall Street and how, you know, essentially that's like a part of history that as soon as it happened, the cover up started and they didn't want anyone to know about it, you know. And it's this whole part. And the thing is like, they did a great job. Like none of us really knew about it, you know? And so, but they were talking about how it's hard to move on, but I really liked how, you know, one of the guys that they were talking to, his name was Jamal. He said, reconciliation starts when you're uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, I really want to talk about that quote.
Yes. You know, and talking, and And that's the whole thing about storytelling, when you're really telling all the story, is that you are going to be uncomfortable, because in anyone's history, things have happened that you're not proud of.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like that quote is so applicable on like a individual scale and on a global scale. I think we did a Think Harder Thursday on that. Where we kind of asked like how does like what does it take to like reconcile with something that's personal and also, you know, on a national level. And I feel like our education system could be so much better about that. Like there needs to be like almost a spiritual component to when we talk about slavery and the genocide of the Native Americans, you know, and like even, you know, Japanese internment camps and, you know, all of these things that are big, nasty things on our story. And you can, you know, there's like this argument of like, should we teach it? Should we not teach it? How far should we go? And I think it should be, the question should be like, it's just a matter of how do we teach it? We're going to teach it. It's just, how do we teach it? You know, like you can teach it in a way that people can reconcile with it, especially if it is in the past. But just because it's in the past doesn't mean that you should say, well, that's in the past and it doesn't matter now.
Yeah, and like of course it matters.
If it was thousands of years in the past, then maybe you could make that argument. But people still study classics, which by classics I don't mean classic literature. I mean like Aristotle, you know, like so it's like yeah, humanity is humanity. Like we have our personal stories, we have our country story, and we have like our human story, you know, and all of it matters. Yeah, like so I think I totally agree with that. Like you can't just tell part of the story. You can't cherry pick.
Yeah, you tell all of it. And you know, part of that is too is, you know, I was a history minor and we heard this all the time. But if you don't know the past, you're destined to repeat it.
Yeah.
And I think you could also argue if you ignore the past, you're destined to repeat it, because I think a lot of us know a lot about the past now, but I think we just choose to ignore it, or we choose to think it's not that big of a deal, or, you know, and the thing is, it's like, but when you do that, that's when we repeat that kind of thing, you know. And I would argue, like, case in point, you know, the Spanish flu, whatever. What was it, like 19? When was it? I don't remember.
1918.
1918. Yeah, Zach was telling me. He was like mouthing it to me. You know, back then, right? We knew the Spanish flu happened. However, what was the part that we weren't told? We weren't told that people were literally rioting so they wouldn't have to wear masks. And so, like, what are we doing now in the middle of a pandemic?
Yeah.
Protesting over wearing a mask. And the thing is, it's like, I know this is like so nitpicky, but it's like, if we had known, like if we'd been taught the full story about it, and not in this like American centric view, but if we had just been taught the history of it, no biases, just the facts, we could have looked back and be like, oh, hey, remember those people? And like, we're laughing at them now because so many people died. And like, that means we shouldn't do that now. And instead it's like, this is the first time anything like this has happened.
Yeah, this unprecedented times.
Yeah. Not really, not so unprecedented, you know.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is it's like, if you don't know about it though, like, how are you supposed to change? Like, how are you supposed to be better? How are you supposed to like reconcile with that and then move on? Because a lot of the times, like, it is hard to move on if you don't have that reconciliation. It's hard to move past it.
Right. Yeah, and it never goes away. Yeah, or even just like, I didn't know that the Spanish flu wasn't the Spanish flu. Like, it either originated here or it originated in many places. I happened to like read, it's called A Short History of Nearly Everything. Right when the pandemic started, and there's a chapter in there on pandemics, and like the author talks about how like they think it like it was like this super nefarious thing where it like migrated to all these different continents and before it like activated or something like that. I guess it's a theory, it's not proven, but so, you know, so it's like there's all this stuff that, you know, about that like you can put that in a textbook. Like you can relay a lot of this information that's really, really critical. It's not that hard.
Yeah, you know, and it's like, or, you know, and here we are again, repeating, you know, what happened. And it's just, I don't know. I think it's definitely like, I thought that chapter did a really good job of kind of being like, you know, we don't have to ignore the past. We can acknowledge that it was bad, and we can acknowledge that it happened, and then we can move on and like try to build a better future. But you can't build a better future if you're just ignoring the past. So I thought that was like a really, really good one.
Definitely. Let's see. I mean, we're kind of already on an hour. I guess the last thing we definitely need to talk about New Orleans. Trying to find something. So New Orleans is like one of the last chapters. And towards the end, I love how they really like get into the idea of music as being this thing that can bring people together. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
I don't know. My boyfriend is a musician and I'm a dancer, so I'm biased. But I think, you know, engineers love music. Every single culture on earth has music. Like, just like it's all over the place. There's a really cool quote. A melody is welcoming in a way no gesture or slogan ever could be. Like I want to do an experiment and like go to, or you can't go to, but like somehow magically be able to appear like a bunch of speakers right when like a big fight breaks out, and then just like blare some like Earth, Wind, and Fire. And like try to hit try it, you know?
For
like,
real.
There's like a Shrek sequel. I don't even know. I think my sister was watching it at one point and it was just on. And I actually like I didn't care about the rest of the movie, but one of the Shrek sequels, there's this dance part where they're all magicked to dance. Like they're all like forced to dance and stuff like that. And it's like this like weird like villainous superpower. It's like being used against them in that situation. But yeah, like you just see how like those things have power. I was really struck by I think it was Jacob Blake's family like did a like gathering that were doing like the Cupid Shuffle. Like did like a community event. That's what they chose to do, I think, to honor him, you know, as well.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you know, like these things really they have so much power. I have this idea, like if I like had money that I was just like giving away, I would give it to organizations that like grassroots organizations, and I say like specifically like use this money to get for catering and live music, and like hold your meetings and just say like, hey, we'll feed you and there's live music, and like how like wouldn't that be like helpful? Do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Like so many people, like, they hear the music and be like, let's go in. And then it's like, oh, being hosted by these people who are like registering you to vote, or, you know, trying to like educate you on like other candidates or climate change or, you know, stuff like that, where it makes it like this positive, it's like not divisive. It's like, how can you be considered as being divisive when you're feeding people, you know, and when you're like bringing people together and dancing and having fun? So that was one of my favorite parts about the New Orleans chapter. And also, you know, they talked to some musicians, which I thought was really cool. Let me see if I can find that. Or did you have a part that you liked?
Yeah, I mean, I liked the whole chapter, but I also lived in New Orleans for a year. I feel like I bring it up all the time. But
you were like saying,
yeah, no big deal. They mentioned Frenchmen though, and like the bars on Frenchmen are really cool, and I kind of prefer them because it is true. The musicians on Frenchmen Street aren't really playing for a ton of people. They're just playing to play, and they're just having fun.
Yeah.
You know, because like Bourbon is where it's like really popping. It's like the big touristy area, but you know, Frenchmen is. I feel like I don't want to say like real music lovers. It's like, that
Yeah.
sounds pretentious, but like, I don't know. It's just like, if you just want to go just to enjoy the music and not necessarily, and enjoy the music and the culture and not necessarily to just like party, then like, you know, exactly where they went is just like so perfect, you know. And it's interesting too, because like everywhere you go, there's music, like everywhere. There's always some kind of music playing. There's always some kind of like music festival happening. You know, when we first moved there, literally on 4th of July, there was just like this free like music festival in the park near our house. Like it was just like this free. I mean, I saw like these like huge country singers, like, you know, like people you'd pay to go see, and it's just free. You know,
Yeah.
because and it's what the community is, and there's always music going on, and like the kids are always dancing, and like it's just a huge part, you know, of like everybody's day is just like music, and it's almost like you can't have a good day without it.
Mm-hmm.
They did a
Yeah.
good job of like letting that come through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, towards the end of the chapter, just like one of the quotes to round it all up is on page 238. But what we saw in New Orleans was a culture that could allow pride to live alongside complexity, where traditions interplayed with other traditions and even formed new ones to express this unique fusion. So I feel like I had a sense that they ended on the New Orleans chapter largely because it's like I think the idea is like New Orleans is so much of what America should be, where it really is like you get like there should be more New Orleans, first of all. You know, like why are there not?
Mm-hmm.
Like not exactly like New Orleans, right? Something completely different.
Yeah.
And that's the idea. I think that's another one of those where they were celebrating this like idea of what America is, and also I think could be.
Yeah, this like melting of culture to become like one culture, you know?
Yeah, because like here in Santa Barbara, I mean, it's beautiful, but they're like in this certain area of town, like downtown, like they're like mandating that things be built in this Spanish style construction, which is beautiful, but it's like there's no symbolism behind it. It's literally just because they know it brings more tourists. You know, it's sort of
Yeah.
like, okay, so, you know, first of all, you still have the Chumash people living here who, you know, they were freaking colonized by the Spanish. And then now you're coming here with your corporate agenda and like
Mm-hmm.
plastering it everywhere, even though you're a bunch of white people. And it's just like, it's just so gross to me at the same time.
Yeah.
Even though as pretty as it is, it's also gross, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just like they're really speaking to something that really is genuine, you know, like really like came from the guts of like a bunch of people coming together and like making art and struggling together and stuff like that. And I just thought that that was really beautiful. And yeah, I definitely want to go to New Orleans even more than I hope.
Yeah, it's a good place to visit. Yeah, so kind of just to like, I guess, wrap it up a little bit. We could probably just keep talking forever about it, but one of the quotes I kind of wanted to get to is in the conclusion on page 285. And they were kind of talking about like Jordan, and like a rabbi said, optimism is the belief that things are changing for the better, and hope is the belief that together we can change things for the better. This made sense to us. Optimism is based on faith about what the future will hold. Hope recognizes things as they are, but also how they could be if we act together to make it so. Hope is neither naive nor blind. It requires courage, resilience, and patience. To have hope is to see what has gone wrong and to believe in what can go right. And that one just like really hit me.
Yeah, I underlined the last sentence for sure. To have hope is to see what has gone wrong and to believe in what can go right. Really, really great.
Yeah, I just thought that was like a really good way to kind of like wrap up everything, because they did see a lot about like what could go wrong. They really did. And yet, you know, after all of the pain, and like they would talk about times where like they just couldn't shake some of the stuff that they had seen and heard. And yet they always came around to this place of like hope that like there are more people that wanted to change the world together than didn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was interesting in our last book, That's last week, right? Yeah, the future Earth.
Mhm.
When someone was talking about how, like, for climate change, it's like we don't need hope, we need courage, and that really resonated with me. And I really like that. But I also appreciate this, yeah, this definition of hope, where they kind of reverse it, where hope is neither naive nor blind. It requires courage. It requires courage, resilience, and patience. Yeah, so I thought that was really beautiful because I think it does. This book ends up doing, like with that quote especially, it ends up doing this beautiful thing of like handing you the pieces and then ending on this sort of like this stance, like this idea of what hope is, and just put it together yourself and you'll get somewhere,
Yeah.
which I really appreciated that. And yeah, I think like we want to try doing this thing where we like make a book case for humanity. And this is our book report. And we want to be a book club of action. So yeah, I think I guess I'll just say like, I think that like they were trying to say, I think they kind of set out with one idea and then they like wrote the book and it like grew from that idea. And so I get the sense of like the idea of like coming together and finding common ground is like kind of the tip of the iceberg, I guess, is
Mhm.
like I think what they're trying to say with this book. Like there's actually like so much we could be doing. And and it's hard, like it's not easy, like we're all like working jobs and just trying not to die right now. Like it's no easy task and there's a lot of distractions.
Yeah.
But just taking the time to read like a short book like this, even if like you bought it last week because you saw us tweet about it and you still want to pick it up, I encourage you to, because there's just something about like, yes, absolutely, like you haven't read the book, come to the live stream and like listen to us talk about it and get something from it. But if you're like at all compelled to pick up the book, this is something you can do where it's like taking that time to read a story about somebody else somewhere
Mhm.
else that doesn't
Yeah.
affect you, your day-to-day life.
Yeah.
um, you can't, a summary cannot do it for you. You have to have the actual like existential experience of interacting with that story, of like coming face to face with it. And that's,
Yeah.
I think, largely what they are doing with this whole adventure that they took.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is the whole like underlayer of finding common ground. Like you can have tips and tricks on how to like, like we were talking about earlier, like listen, don't go in trying to change someone's mind, like stuff like that. But there's all this stuff that's happening underneath at the same time. And so I think that's really what they're speaking to with this book.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that goes along with it is giving people back their humanity,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not just looking at them as like being on the other side or like being from this place or like supporting this person. I think it's kind of like, yeah, at the heart of it, we're all humans, right? And I think that's one of the reasons we all kind of flocked to the yanking, right? Is we all wanted to be seen as human beings again.
Yeah.
But I think that same thing that we want other people to see us as a human, first and foremost, I think we also have to give that to other people. We
Mm-hmm.
have to also see other people as human and realize that people are complex.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there are some people that have like herd mentalities. There's some people that will just latch onto these things, but there are reasons for that. People
Yeah.
are complex, and I think what this book kind of taught me is that like we have to give people back their humanity and stop seeing them as like other, and see them as humans. And I think
Yeah.
that was kind of a good theme, is just like giving people back their humanity. And I think if we're going to be, a humanity first movement or a humanity forward movement, then like that's something we have to do. We can't just expect other people to treat us as humans and then treat other people however we want. We
Yeah.
also have to,
Yeah. Even when it is frustrating to you and like you feel like you're dealing with someone who like you think that they're evil or you think that they're so much a part of the problem. They're not. Like they're really not. Like the problems are so much bigger than any one individual, even with Trump. And it's like, you're gonna argue with me that? That's what Andrew Yang said, you know?
Yeah, you know, that's what I'm saying. Like, people are complex, and like there's a lot that goes into a person's choice, and there's a lot that goes into, like, you know, what's happening around this. And I think just getting back into that, like, I really, at the heart of it, we're all humans, and I think that's something that we can acknowledge and then go from there. And I think, you know, that could be a good call to action, is just, you know, start looking at each other as humans again, and stop looking at each other as the enemy immediately upon. And I know it's hard to do on Twitter. I understand that. I get it. On Twitter, you're just seeing the worst of people, I feel like. But in real life, I just truly mean, like, in real life, just treat people with, like, respect, you know, treat people the way it's just the fucking golden rule. Really, treat people the way you want to be treated, you know, like, truly, you know. And you want people to understand you. Other people want to be understood too. And I think that that's really, you know, that was also one of the things that the book goes into. Anyways, we've been talking for an hour and a half.
Before we go, I just want to get on my soapbox a little bit, because considering that we're an online space, I feel like there's a real crisis right now around just information. And I feel like there's so much of, like, people just saying, like, well, I have the facts and you don't have the facts. Or, like, I tweeted something the other day that was a video that was, like, old, and, like, people were like, it was like trying to prove a point, and people were like, well, this video is old, like, you know, like, and that's just gonna happen. Like, you know, it's just like right now, like, if you haven't seen The Social Dilemma, I think that, you know, we kind of can't have this conversation without at least bringing up the fact that, like, technology is having a huge impact on, like, how we go about doing these things we're talking about. And so, like, I have just gotten to the point where, like, after watching that, especially, having an incredible amount of grace for people, you know, we are all in our own echo chambers right now. Like, it is not our fault. Like, you can try to work against it and have some amount of success, but, like, it's become pretty evident that, like, it's on a huge scale. So I think that, like, trying to have a lot of grace and mercy to, you know, to other people, and then to yourself sometimes, because you might do something that's stupid, or that, like, makes you look stupid, you know. And, like, I've kind of already done that, because I'm not like super on my social media all the time. I'm not, like, you know, like, it's constantly changing and I'm barely keeping up. I'm already such a granny. So anyway, yeah, I think that just needs to be said, because it's like, we need to just all, like, be really just talking with a lot of grace to people about when it comes to, like, stuff like facts. And yeah, basically that's it.
Yeah, agreed. All right. Well, this was a really good one. Again, this was Union.
This is the book.
Follow Chris and Jordan on social media. They've been really great. Buy the book. And do we want to introduce our next book?
Yeah, I have it. Do you have it?
I do.
Look at you, Megan. I'm really dark on my end.
So this is Dread Nation
by Justina Ireland, who you can also follow on Twitter. And there's actually already a sequel out to this. We didn't know that when we picked it up. But yeah, for Halloween, or for October, which is the Halloween month, right? That's
and my birthday month.
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask you when your birthday was. Sweet. Yeah, so fun book time, guys. Zombies meets post-Civil War America meets awesome young heroine. She is great. She's cracking me up. Yeah. I'm already, like, halfway through.
I thought the juxtaposition of this was really funny.
Union is just a big book. This is, like, normal size.
Yeah, well, it's also really funny because it's like Union, Dread Nation.
Yeah, I know, right? Oh, yeah. Right? That's so anyway, this is great so far. I am loving this. It's really good. This should be a Netflix series. I think it's really, really good. It's a little bit like I haven't seen Westworld, so actually I shouldn't say Westworld. There's another show actually I'm thinking of that I can't think of right now. So anyway, yeah, no, it's just really good. So yeah, make sure you're on the Twitter YG Book Club, on Instagram Yang Gang Book Club. Fill out our form on our Twitter page so that you can be on the newsletter.
Yeah.
And yeah, just turn on your notifications so you can catch all of our book content, writing content, philosophy content, stuff like that. Just cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for stopping by.
Thank you all. Thanks, reader friends.
Bye.
We'll see you next time. Bye.